going to start recording as well. Okay, and Becca, let me know if I'm doing anything wrong. You're more of a whiz on Zoom than I am, so.
Everything looks good so far, Val.
Great. Okay, let's see here. Share. Make this big and switch the screens out. Give me 1 second. Swap. Okay. Nope. Okay. Yes. So no one else is in the other room. So we're going to have Chelsea join us here shortly. Okay. All righty. Let's go ahead and get started here because we do have a lot to cover. I want to make sure that we have time for it all. So welcome. This is our West Working Group meeting number 2. And so thank you all for being here. Again, just always want to bring back at the beginning our shared agreements that Councilwoman Torres went over with us last week. So allowing room for all, first before seconds, when agreeing, avoid repeating what others have said. When disagreeing, be respectful and focus on the idea, not the person. Utilize the raise hand function and or chat messaging. Our team will be keeping track of the chat and Chelsea is going to take our handy dandy notes today. And of course, just for better engagement, always have your camera on if possible. So again, just very quickly, this is the only time I'm going to talk at you all, and I hate doing this as well. We'll get into discussion here in a minute. So we're taking this time to do a deep dive to make improvements on the draft. Just a reminder, we'll be meeting every Wednesday until the end of July. That's our 8-week period that we've kind of baked into the process in moving into the creation of public draft number 2. And so we had our first meeting where we kind of went through the list of themes and categories with you, really to try and understand if this was all that we were capturing, and of course hearing that there might be more that comes up along the way. And so in this meeting in particular, and also recognizing sort of all the different comments and feedback that we received from you all in the emails yesterday and today. Again, we do have MPI leadership right now out of office. They're on some much needed vacations, so we'll let them be. And we've got our awesome teammates, Chelsea and Becca, here with us. And so because we only have so much power and what we can do to move things in our department, we kind of wanted to stick to the safe route here and just kind of keep with our ideas and things that we talked about in terms of prioritizing quality of life, given that that is a huge intersectionality within all of the different pieces of this plan. And so really just trying to focus on what's the concerns, what does the draft say, and then how specifically does the draft need to change is really the goal, hopefully, in the outcome of this. And then just looking ahead in terms of where the process might go is, we're going to meet through the end of July and in hopes of creating the second draft, which would include sort of these sub bullets here, right? The working group edits, our steering committee edits, all the public comments that we're receiving from our soft launch of the first draft. And then of course, it'll also include, Kathy, we were talking about this a little bit earlier back and forth, the implementation chapter and the matrix. So we can go into more of that later on. And then obviously we want to give the steering committee another round of review for that second draft. And make sure that we're all on the same page and in alignment before we go into our full public release, which would include promotion and the outreach and engagement plan for that draft number 2. So today's agenda is short but powerful. So Elizabeth, I again didn't hear back from you in your email, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I did want to just open up some space for you to help us lead the conversation around understanding our powerful conversations guide, just to get us started before we dive any further into quality of life, and then spend the rest of our time workshopping and going through comments that our team has been working on the back end to address, also comments that we have in process, and then unpack a little bit more in depth some of the comments that we're trying to better understand in terms of those desired changes. And so with that, Elizabeth, I'm going to stop. Do you want me to stop sharing my presentation so that you can pull up the document and walk us through, or would you like me to walk us through? How do you want to go about this piece?
That's a great question. um, I have a sense, and I'd love to hear from other folks about this, but just the recap of the sense that I got from our last meeting is that it would be helpful to ground ourselves in the principles and priorities overview and then like get into the specifics, but that what was a challenge last week. I know that when presented with a list of bullet points, I got sucked into the weeds a lot, and there was just a lot of agree, disagree sort of stuff on a bullet by bullet bit. And I feel like I lost the forest for the trees, and I talked more than I would have liked to. And so my hope is that we use tools to help keep us at that integrated bit. I think it might be helpful to use the slides that you prepared. I can bring up mine, but want to make sure that everybody has this document handy because there have been so many emails going around. And I don't even know that I have it handy myself, so I can pick that up. But I don't know if like it's probably too difficult to read what's on there and on the slide, but I think starting with that framework and then looking at maybe quality of life might be helpful. But I would hope that if we all think that this is a helpful tool to look at the general directions of stuff, I think it would be, my hunch is that it would be helpful to use as we go through section by section and do a check to see if that guides it, and that next week really be focused on the spatial and measurable impacts of stuff. But I don't know, Kathy, do you have, or anyone else, do you have a thought on what would be most productive?
Well, I think when you have this more repair, regenerative transformation piece, a lot of the quality of life really seems to tie into sort of facing that history, acknowledging that history, as well as the patterns of displacement. And I think that really helps set the stage of what, I don't know if it will make us whole, but what things would be in this plan that would get us towards some of that reparative work. So I think that's what I thought was sort of missing in the plan itself, is that we have a little brief snapshot of the history, but then it's sort of put on the shelf. And I think what you were trying to do, Elizabeth, was sort of have that theme of history be a part of the story and tackling some of these different issues in that reparative manner.
Yeah. And the history that we already have in the quality of life plan thankfully includes redlining. But we collectively, we're wanting to get past land acknowledgements to learning from Indigenous ways of principles and practices of governance too, and like land use planning. So the history section gets to that as well.
And Elizabeth, let me know if you want me to go to any parts of this document specifically. I know it's a lot, but we can absolutely sort of unpack any of these components in particular. Just, I don't know where you want to start, but let me know how I can navigate better.
I guess I would love to maybe hear from everybody. Everybody's received this document, but I don't know who's had a time to we've iteratively, most folks on the call have iteratively been looking at it over time. And this was a distillation of a collective giant brainstorm that was like 30 pages long. So though this is dense, it's way better. But I don't know, I'd love to, like, this was my best attempt to synthesize what we've been collectively talking about. I also think that we haven't looked at this guiding principles page because I threw that together last because I realized that though we had included the words integrity, reciprocity, and liberty before it goes into the history, didn't really unpack that and how those principles at the bottom of regenerative vitality allow for equity to be emboldened. Like equity demands a healthy, thriving social and ecological environment, but equity can sometimes look like equal, even when people are thinking about like just at this socially equal, but you can have socially equal or equitable on the Titanic, and that sort of sucks. So pardon my language choices, but anyway, my hunch is that it might be helpful for us all to review this and think about it being operationalized within quality of life. But I'd love to hear from other people about what you would like to do. I'm not quite sure what's most productive.
I'll go ahead and chime in. I think even if you just go through the quality of life section more, on what makes us whole and how it's different than maybe that is reflected in the plan, might help to see how these themes and threads carry out through first in the quality of life section, but also tie into the mobility and the land use section.
Thanks, Kathy.
Just thought.
I like it. I don't know. I'm trying to think of how to do it right now.
Well, this is just my opinion, but having seen this concept before, I love it, and I think to me it's an interpretation of this grandiose idea. And so working within, in all due respect, Val, I'm not saying this towards anyone, but working with city government, I wonder, like, how do we attack this and use this document in a meaningful way, but yet knowing that city government is probably not going to embrace all of it. So what is the most important part? And like Kathy said, how do we let quality of life along with this document lead? How much of that is, how much of that is going to take hold? Because I feel like having seen this work before, and while it's beautiful, sometimes I feel like this is like a Cinderella story. This is so beautiful. Are they ever going to really embrace something? So I feel like we're working with two systems. We're working with the future, what we want, what is beautiful, what can be, but we're also working with government. And so knowing a little bit about, well, a lot about government and a little bit about this, I feel like where do we start? Are some of these things possible, Val?
Yeah, I can try to take a stab at that, Yvonne, and that these are great questions and things that our team has been discussing very actively as we're reviewing the number of comments that we've received through these different documents. And I think, Chelsea and Becca, feel free to add once I'm done kind of responding here. But I think one of the things that we've been really thinking about as we're trying to be intentional in sorting through and organizing, what comments can we address now? What comments are more complex, need a little bit more unpacking and clarity on, like, what is the desire that this, or the outcome that this comment needs to have? And then the other bigger bucket, right, zooming way out of the West Plan, is what is more of like policy change, right? What are things that we can give back to the council persons that might need more effort moving forward, that are truly systemic and institutional as far as racial inequities, inclusivity, equity, diversity, things like that. And I think that there's a number of things that we'll find in the second half of the workshop. And I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves here, but like just in thinking about those examples and the ways that we sorted things to understand how to really truly address each of these with that intention and the realistic and feasibility piece, right? Like what is actually realistic here? What can the plan do, right? That's something that is definitely difficult to ask, but you know, as we're taking bites at each of these themes, we're better understanding like what does the plan need to say. But before we make any type of changes or suggestive changes, we want to make sure that one, we're running by you, like, is this everything we need to hear and see as far as what we need to be thinking about in terms of change to the plan? What else, right? And so Becca, Chelsea, do you want to add just any perspective or response to that question that Yvonne asked?
I thought that was beautifully said, Val. And just really learning how to balance what can we do as a city government and what aspirations should we put in the plan, because it shouldn't just be standard everything is normal, right? That's not how we get anywhere. So figuring out how to craft the aspirations that can push all of our plans, push our whole city forward. I think that's where you guys are really key in helping us figure that out.
So then you are receptive to not necessarily leading with the old way when the city needed development. Now you are open to the fact that we have enough development and maybe now it's time to lead with the neighborhood voice. Is that kind of what I heard you say a little bit, Becca?
Well, I don't know, this might be splitting hairs too, but I think what we're asking for is development, but not speculative development, like development that supports intergenerational community rooted health and wealth, and looking for different ways to do it. And I sense that, like what Becca said, was that being able to name the value of naming the long-term aspiration is valuable, even if like getting there, like it's a North Star thing, even if over the short term, what's politically realistic is gonna fall short of that in the short term. But if that's there, if it can help keep pulling into the future that we really desire, as we learn, like none of us has like the solutions to climate change that we can just be like boom. And I really want them. I don't have them. Like, I know performance zoning is a thing, but I haven't found great case studies of how it's worked already. I don't know what cultures and administrative cultures and capacities have allowed that to work well. So there's stuff in here that I think like that has happened and people have been like pushing for those shifts, but as I think it's important to have that, but it's going to be a minute likely before those things get in there. And I just realized that like we had at some point had participatory budgeting stuff as a priority, and I don't think that's I can't remember if that's even in here. You can see I used every little bit of space that I had to try to keep it to 10 pages. And there's, as Kathy has pointed out, like this is a theme around other things that can fit in. It's not a total, it's a framework for thinking through it. I guess that leads me to another question too, like could some version that's vetted from this group be included as an expression of the quality of life team in the plan, even if it's like some parts of this would probably be valuable for the executive summary, some of it fit into the introduction. Like I think the equity articulation would be a helpful complement or adjustment to what's in there now, and including the longer history of displacement. But I am I know, like I feel like there's there's a value of document that this conversation was happening, even if not, I don't know what we can have in the plan that fully aligns with it, but I'm curious the different functions or places that this could be.
Yeah, so Elizabeth, I'll kind of start with the response on that. I am not opposed. I think that we could absolutely try and bake into the plan some of these concepts and things that you've incorporated into this powerful conversations guide. I think as a reviewer or sort of as someone that's trying to incorporate this, maybe I wonder if we could unpack a little bit things like, so I actually brought up this page because I was really conflicted in this false solutions piece. And I wonder if you could clarify sort of how you wrote this or the intention behind it, because, you know, and in the first bullet, it does say like simply increasing density limits is a false solution to our affordable housing crisis and our need for vibrant, resilient local economies. And then the second bullet speaks to simply limiting density is a false solution. So like in my planner head, it's like, well, that's a zero out, right? Or no, I just kind of I wonder if you could just explain a little bit this false solutions concept and help us unpack this one a little bit more.
I see Kathy's hand up. And
Well, I was going to suggest that we started with the quality of life piece and kind of go through sort of that kind of comparison in looking at what this would be proposing versus what we're sort of seeing in the plan as a way to give that dimension of how that might be more integrated.
let's do that. And I'll address shortly as a transition to that, what that was about. Like, I mean, it speaks to the quality of life imperative of integration and planning for taking a systemic approach where we plan interventions in different places of the system together. Like if you increase density limits and that's all you do, like you're just going to have more speculative development and it is not going to be walkable. Like we increased density limits in West Colfax and the Jewish community really wanted a walkable neighborhood. And they were told that if they increased the density, they would have a walkable neighborhood and it would be great for their community to have easy time walking on the days where like no one drives a car. And like they're committed to walkable neighborhoods. We don't have that. Most of the people who move, like my sense is that parking's we're still auto dependent. I live 2 blocks from the rail station, and there's I don't like it, especially with the pandemic, but even beyond, like it's not targeting it, and we don't, it's the other aspects of a walkable neighborhood aren't there. And so simply increasing density did not create the quality of life that's wanted. At the same time, simply limiting density is like the fancy, consistent way that like people of privilege box out, like it's an exclusionary zoning technique. Like simply limiting density does not create diverse, walkable neighborhoods either. Like the West Colfax Food Co-op couldn't get off the ground in part because like it was the rental prices were so difficult, but it was also like other confounding factors as well. So anyway, like you need to be able to have a density of people in an area to support local businesses and a level of social capital that's built by that's encouraged by certain built environment features. So it just brings to that quality of life commitment about integrating making sure that our mobility investments and that our economic development support and our greenways and our housing infrastructure investments are all integrated. And I think that's like what we'll be able to do with maps more next time to make sure they're all talking to each other. But a simple, like thinking you can just do that and trust that it works is not workable. And we do need like climate change demands that we address gentrification. Climate change demands that we have options to be able to live without a car in a dense, vital environment. But gentrification leads to suburbanization of poverty, and doesn't give people that like many amenity rich place, but also like we're getting the suburbanization of poverty already. And I'm rambling right now, but I think that was like, we need this to make sure that we're integrating and to have a healthy habitats for all. There's no silver bullet, basically.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That's very helpful. And this is the kind of unpacking that our team needs to really understand all of this and gain more context. And, you know,
And
Kathy,
I want to point to Sean too, because Sean has consistently said like, oh my gosh, like they're like, I don't know, like I want a dense. Sean rides his bike everywhere and picks up the coffee grounds from Starbucks and brings it to the garden where Andrea grows food. Like there's a density, like having some increased density can increase the quality of Sean's life, but he doesn't want to do that if it's leading to massive displacement. And
Sure,
he
yeah.
has said, you know, I don't understand the trade-offs.
Right,
and
right.
I think with systems thinking, we can find more win-win-wins and not have to resign ourselves to simply the trade-offs. Like there is a way to be able to have a wonderful neighborhood and not have massive displacement. We just have to shift the way we think about development.
Awesome. Thank
And
you.
I'm going to stop talking for a long time.
No, that's okay. I was just going to ask the question. So just hearing Kathy, it sounds like we want to go ahead and switch gears to the quality of life review. Before we do that, just opening space for everyone else on this small working group. Does anyone want to add any
What
perspective?
I was trying to say, Valerie, was to go to the quality of life in this document.
Oh, I apologize, Kathy. Is that this one here? Am I on the right
Yeah,
page?
thank
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Grateful
So-
that you've been able to do that.
Yeah, so if you guys want to just have a bit of a conversation on this, we've still, it's 4:30, I'm keeping track of time, so we can spend some time if we want to unravel this in particular. And again, just speaking to the entire group and seeing if there's any other perspective, just following what Elizabeth was saying just now.
Well, this is Sean. Yeah, I Elizabeth gave me a shout out, but the main thing I think that Elizabeth really, I think I've been talking about is, I think that is a very difficult conversation. The whole like high density, low density, and I don't know how we can have our cake and eat it too, and have the best benefits of high density and the best benefits of low density, and I think that's a really impossible task. And I'm sorry, Valerie, but I don't know what the solution is. And I think it's a very difficult conversation. I don't know what the best way to solve it. And I just think I'm just challenged. So.
I appreciate that, Sean. I think all of us are in the same boat, right? We're trying to figure out like, what are the best solutions? And that's really what we're trying to get to in these workshops as well. So I just thinking about utilizing our time well, how do we want to unravel this particular section? Kathy, would you
Right.
like to?
Yeah, so I'll take a stab at it. So if
Okay.
you look at even like the first or second paragraph, when you're talking about tying in the equity, racial equity piece to the past history of disparate impacts due to redlining, colonization, air pollution, et cetera, and that has gone on, and disinvestment has been the pattern. As we're saying, equitable investment. So that could translate certainly into how even the city budgets itself to make sure that there's more equitable budgeting that's impacting disparate impacted neighborhoods. So something that looking at that piece of it ties into trying to, again, repair past air quality, soil hazards, food deserts, looking at economic benefits that are supporting families in these communities, and housing affordability that includes home ownership and generational wealth. Those begin to put the ties together on when you start with equitable investment and how that translated, that you don't go with one solution saying, yes, we want to have high density, but you end up with all apartments and you don't have any home ownership. So instead of saying high density equals a lot of affordable apartments with nobody having any generational wealth, that you might have all different kinds of housing involved with a plan that would try to encourage more of the goal of generational wealth, that would encourage mitigation of, you know, environmental hazards that have happened by providing maybe more green zones in certain area, or more tree canopy in certain area, or more of a dealing with retention areas that create these heat islands by creating more green spaces. So to me, you have one of the many problems that you're trying to tackle, and the solution within the plan is how you try to remedy that problem. I don't quite see that within the plan now. I see sort of some stabs at it. Some of them get closer than others. And I think that's where we need to sort of keep on moving the ball to see how we can make those equitable investments so they're regenerating the infrastructure that we have the impacts of I-25 and Highway 6 with high air pollution. What does that look like as far as an infrastructure investment from the city? You know, I mean, there is sort of more bike lanes maybe being proposed, but maybe there's more green canopy that can be a part of the equation. Or you create maybe more housing in some of the industrial areas, so you're reducing the impervious surface. You know, so I think we need to sort of tie our solutions to the past that has been a problem as a way to see how this neighborhood area plan moves those inequities to more equitable investments. So for me, that's what I'm sort of seeing, that these tie together as themes that can be translated into solutions within the plan, but it needs to be saying that. It needs the plan's issues need to be addressed. Not that they're sort of out there in the middle and not quite sure if they got addressed or not, but saying, yeah, we're actually going to be looking at investments that are equitable because we're going to encourage more, I don't know, urban redevelopment dollars to help small businesses take hold. We're going to encourage green zones, so we have zoning that has more green landscaping to try to reduce impervious surfaces. I mean, you can sort of see a direct correlation. So to me, that is what I sort of see. And looking at what the quality of life will make us whole is that we're tying those problems to the solutions we're trying to move forward, so that we don't have still the disparities that are so pronounced. So that's what I sort of see in this page, is to allow for that to be expressed more throughout, whether it relates to mobility, whether it relates to housing, whether it relates to parks and open space. I don't know if anyone else can help add to that or has any other connections.
This is great. This is excellent context and feedback. Kathy, thank you for all of that. For my team, Becca or Chelsea, do we have any follow-up questions or anything with regards to capturing this in our notes? And if there's no questions from you all, then for the rest of the group, if you'd like to add, chime in, please feel free. We want to hear your voice.
Yeah, I think that was a really helpful explanation. So thank you. And I think I have it captured so far, but looking forward to hearing from others too.
Anyone else we haven't heard from? I'd be interested just to hear your perspective. There's been a lot said, and I know there's a few voices we're not hearing, so just want to encourage you.
I think I'd be happy to jump in for a couple minutes just to
Thanks, Heidi.
to speak more about this. what really kind of got us around this page, and thinking about how the city has so heavily depended on development to solve all of these bigger issues, really. And, you know, meetings that we're in where, you know, we ask for things and it feels like, well, that, you know, the development solves for this stuff, you know, the city does it. And I think that sort of the one thing that can flip the switch and in this plan is that, you know, the skills that they have with engineering and planning can come into play with a systems approach that addresses inequities and comes from the assumption that the people that live in these communities know more than maybe a developer would, or you know, it's not a developer's job really to come in and solve quality of life, or you know, they come in and they fill in the box. You know, they're going to come to this plan and just kind of find out, you know, how big, how fast, you know, how much, and they answer questions that have to do with their bottom line, not what we have. So without any of these parameters set or goals set, then they come in and we attract people that are speculative. We attract people that are looking to extract, that don't, you know, that don't understand anything that we're talking about, or maybe they do and don't know how to address it. I don't know. But leaving that up to the developer has brought us everything that we've seen in the last decade or so, just in the immediate change of, you know, what happened with Blueprint Denver and the zoning change. So with the quality of life, when we're looking at our maps and we're seeing these, you know, these heat zones, and we're seeing the tree canopy being lost, we're seeing all of the water resources and basins and water quality basins along our rivers and our gullies, that connection, that ecology of our land, to be able to inform, you know, and to guide and to set those principles that the neighborhood and the communities want to see in our plan. So that performance zoning, so that that these things that we see, what makes us whole, can be translated into a matrix, into performance standards, into maybe some budgeting. I don't remember what, you know, the budgeting, priority budgeting, or whatever that language was around that. And that, you know, where we're missing it in the plan. Like, I think that, you know, I read over the plan over the last couple of days just to kind of get participatory budgeting. Thank you, Elizabeth. We're you know, looking through the plan, and it's not necessarily that the language, you know, there's a lot of really good stuff in here. It's just, it doesn't seem to pan out when it comes to it seems to boil down to height and density, and these quality of life issues can't be translated into that. And that where things are being recommended, you know, for density, it really just looks like density, and it doesn't look like an ecology plan. It doesn't look like it doesn't look like, and it doesn't attract people development that we can be in relationship with, that we can direct, that is going to, you know, have us be more resilient and equitable. So I think, you know, flipping that switch from attracting extractive development into to an ecology base, coming from all of you know, the lessons we've learned or are trying to learn with the harm that has been done over, you know, since inception. So that's, I think, you know, and that's why we keep referring back to the maps, because I think that's where, at least where I find the most, that's where the rubber hits the road for me. So that's where I would really, I think there's really a lot of potential to create something that that represents what we're talking about and attracts that to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. We appreciate your feedback and added context. That was very helpful. Kathy, I see your hand up. We can go ahead and go back to you if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a real quick curiosity. I noticed when we're having a new developer that was wanting to add 3 units to replace a single family home, And there was some questions of whether that there was an equity analysis being done. And so I'm wondering if the city does have a component like that, where they have an equity analysis in looking at development. I mean, in his scenario, if he was going to replace a single family home that could have an ADU with 3 units, but he would sell them each for 700,000 a piece, then if we had that equity analysis, it might tell us, well, that's not creating affordable housing. That's not building any generational wealth. It's probably building displacements because he wants to rezone that. So to me, that's kind of a thing that could help, a tool that could be integrated even into this kind of a plan, where you have that equity analysis on who is really benefiting and who is being burdened. You know, and what are the unintended consequences of that? You know, sort of using that standard equity tool that the Government Alliance for Racial Equity has. When you do that kind of an analysis, then you can begin to see what is really perhaps not being solved, because you have these extra burdens that are being incurred. So I was wondering that I have if the city is starting to move in that direction, or is it just
And a
rumor?
question about that, Kathy, that was a request for a variance, right? Like
No, it's a request for rezoning.
a rezoning, a total rezoning. Yeah, so I mean, there's a bullet point on that quality of life that speaks directly to that. And so like, I mean, it would be, I know that in Austin and Denver, variances are like, whatever, sure. And it is maddening, and it's not what I don't know, it defeats the good purposes of zoning when it just serves developers there. But could it be, I mean, are there ways that we could design that and more of, you know, that those would be granted if you can demonstrate that your approach to development is expanding the public interest in specific ways through the equity analysis that Kathy just mentioned, through like ecosystem services that would be complemented, or I don't know, like there's lots of ways that like Heidi pointed out where that parcel is. There are lots of ways that parcel could be generating social and community capitals of different types, and ecological capital.
Right. So they had the homeowner, if you sold the home to a homeowner who could already build an ADU, you would have 2 units, but then they would get at least some income from the ADU to build more generational wealth. So then you're benefiting maybe a naturally occurring affordable housing in comparison to the rest of the area that would have that equity analysis show that, well, no, that rezoning maybe wouldn't make sense if we're trying to create and maintain generational wealth and reinforce that as a goal. So that's just an example where this begins to sort of really become very tangible and something that you can see happening if we were under different assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
Shayla, I saw your thumb go up, and I know that you also are, you know, very interested and active in keeping track of the changes in Barnum and Barnum West, and also just would love to hear your voice and see if you have anything to add to the discussion as far as what we're talking about. Not to put you on the spot, but just to create some space for you.
I was definitely having some thoughts, and those are all really interesting to me. We have another lot as well in our neighborhood that's actually 2 lots. So we could potentially end up with 6 units on the 2 lots. And the piece that Kathy had mentioned about equity analysis. So I'm trying to connect all the dots in my brain, so forgive me if this doesn't come out clear. Essentially, when a developer or somebody who wants to develop a lot wants to upzone, they go to the city and request the zoning and go through the hearing process. But what I've found in going to those hearings is that they'll do what they're required to do, go around to the neighborhood, ask the neighbors what they think of it, try and get people on board, but they don't usually have their actual plan ready to go because they're going to build to their bottom line. But my question is, within this plan and informing policy around rezoning or upzoning, is whether or not an equity analysis could be included in order to go to that hearing process. And once they've said, okay, yes, I will do X, Y, and Z for the tree canopy or for eco-friendly building and inspiring green building, or affordable housing, whatever that is in this analysis that equates out to an acceptable amount of, this is a developer who is investing into the community for quality of life, then potentially gets the zoning granted. And then on a follow-up, I think personally, there needs to be something written in the policy that those items are checked off at permitting inspections. And then that might be a way forward. And that the developers, like Heidi was saying, we could hopefully invite developers in. Well, unfortunately, developers are bottom line, and really it's the people who are funding the developers that are making the most money. Developers can a lot of times get their butts handed to them in developing, is creating incentives to promote this type of building and investment into communities, that it becomes the norm. Like, I understand we probably can't create funding for forever, but ideally that we create a way of building that becomes the norm. And I don't know if that's something that the city can build into their budgeting, which was kind of talked about a little bit earlier, or if it's something that comes in a general fund. That's above my pay grade. So that's all. I'll stop talking.
Thank you, Shayla. That was very helpful, and we appreciate your voice and context as well. And I also want to just touch on the folks that haven't had a chance to share out yet. I know that we have Jean, Sean, Yvonne. Do you all have any thoughts you'd like to bring to the table?
Hi, it's Jean.
Oh, Yvonne, and I think Yvonne, you were talking on mute.
Oh, sorry,
Jean,
you go ahead.
Yvonne, do you want to go ahead and then we can go to Jean?
Well, I just I just feel like we already know, and some of the false solutions address that. We already know, the harm that gentrification has brought. I mean, the Gonzaleses live in my neighborhood, and now they're going to move, and so that rich family who's been in the neighborhood probably not as long as my family, so we'll never know their story. We'll never get, and then they think that they're getting all this money, but where are they going to go? There's no housing that's affordable in Denver for a big family. And so I'm wondering if the metrics, and maybe it's over time, we say, only so much of this, only so much of that, and try to slow it down. And I don't even really know conceptually what I'm getting at, but what I'm trying to say is everybody keeps saying, oh, this was wrong, we did that wrong, oh, we got to slow this down. But when is enough enough? I mean, when are we going to finally say, we're losing rich history, we're losing, or is that okay? Is that what everybody wants? I don't think so. I don't want that. So I'm just like, what is it going to take to think outside of the box? Maybe this metrics that Kathy keeps talking about is going to be a check and balance, and, maybe more performance zoning, maybe more stop signs, more speed bumps, whatever that is, because, we've got to save what we have left. That's what I was trying to say in my chat.
Thank you, Yvonne. Yes, and I was reading through your chat, so I appreciate you just adding more context behind that message as well. And all of your comments and feedback are noted, absolutely. And I think you're right on the money there. I don't think anyone wants to see any of our, pieces of culture and the rich ethnicity that exists in these neighborhoods continue to go away. And I just want to recognize and acknowledge that's what the plan is trying to avoid. That, right, is trying to bring us to a path of how do we preserve our culture, how do we preserve our context of our neighborhood, right? And again, right now we don't have all the answers. The needle is moving slowly, but I will say it is moving. I mean, as someone that's been working under the neighborhood planning umbrella for 5 years, I have this conversation with some of these folks individually, but it is difficult to move the needle, right? Especially in a system that's already established and has been running the way that it does. But I just do want to bring us back to the fact that this plan is monumental in that it is changing that system and changing the way that we write these plans. I think we've come a really long way, but we also have a lot of work to do. So I do just want to share that and mention that on behalf of the team as well. And I also want to get to Jean. So Jean, would you like to share and add some perspective to the conversation?
Well, I don't want to say too much because I always look at this through the lens of Sun Valley, which is in a somewhat unique situation. We're actually looking to invite people to move in that have some money. And so our big challenge is to make sure then that the amenities that, follow with trying to attract business don't just cater, to a higher income group. And so we're trying to get more of a mixed income so we can have an economy, which we really haven't been able to have. So we kind of take it from a little bit different. So I just hope that even with the equity lens and any kind of things that we do, it can apply to both when we're actually trying to attract, investment, and maybe, invigorate economy, as opposed to just trying to protect wealth that already exists. So, having a tool that's useful on kind of both sides of the equation. And I don't see that they're mutually exclusive by any means. In terms of Sun Valley's needs and the other neighborhoods that are in this West Area plan. I think that we're talking about things and policies that go beyond just what this plan is, but how do we really implement this plan? And what are the policies that need to be put in place, or the practices to put in place to implement it? And I understand when you say that the needle moves really slowly, we're making some headway. We've made a little bit of headway in say the affordable housing somewhat, but just going back to like the large development review process, that isn't that old, and we've only used it a few times. That was really disappointing that we could not get more involvement after the zoning with the community. So it's almost like you have to do everything up front. And like, I can't remember who said it, but usually you don't even know what the plans are, and you're somehow agreeing, or the community is agreeing to, or raising caution or whatever they're doing for plans that really haven't been developed. They're just so very high level. And there really is no mechanism to come back to the community and have continued involvement and accountability to the community as those plans unfold. Even with the Stadium District Master Plan, I think CDP, did a good job, but frankly, the few meetings that we did have of the advisory committee, which we actually even wrote into the the master plan, was only happened because CDP, called them. So from the developer side, there was almost no involvement really. and or action or initiative taken by the developer, which for lack of a better developer, it was still the stadium the stadium district combined with, what was it, the investment company they formed. So I just, I just think that was really a missed opportunity. And of course, a lot of the zoning that goes on never goes to a large development review. They're just kind of a parcel by parcel. I don't know how to really make these things more known, because there was quite a bit of involvement on that LDR. We have the policy about the zoning, but that's one thing, but it's really calling the developer as a whole, or holding the developer as a whole accountable back to the community as they develop their plans, to make sure that they're aligned with some of the promises that have been made, or that they're actually benefiting the community. So that's my thought.
Thank you, Jean. And we appreciate the difference in context, right? I mean, while we're in 6 neighborhoods, they're all very different in their own unique ways. So I appreciate that context on behalf of Sun Valley as well, and just kind of the different issues and challenges in comparison to the other areas. And so I do also want to recognize that we are about to be at 5 o'clock. Sean, I know you spoke a little bit, and I do want to kind of move us into the next piece. So I just wonder if there's anything else that anyone wants to add on this particular component of the Powerful Conversations Guide before we move into the quality of life review, or if we need more time on this, also please let me know as well. I just want to make sure that we're covering everything that we need to.
As we move into that other review and the clarifying question that you asked Val before about, okay, so simply increasing density or simply limiting density. I like the answer in this quality of life bit is this emphasis on building capacity for systems view. And the quality of life section, we already loved generally. And so I think some of one thing that we might think about is people had commented, if I remember, that there was a lot of overlap all over the plans or the different sections, but some that were contradictory. And it might be helpful when we review the quality of life plan, like if the conclusion section, or if there were special little call out sections in the color of the other plans, to be able to say, for this quality of life thing to happen, we need this or something to help. Like, it would be awesome if somebody reading this document starts to build capacity to make those connections, those other parts of the system as they're doing it. But because it's not how we've been taught to think, and we can't have any one of these solutions work without having a couple of other things supporting it. And I don't know what the best format for that is, but we might read through the quality of life section with the sense of, okay, this is awesome, and what do we need to say? Make sure that the affordable housing and economy section, or the housing and economy section, picks up to, or the mobility section picks up to ensure that there's, not green gentrification or something. I don't know what that looks like, but it might be that quality of life thing was definitely trying to help make sure that we were integrating.
Thank you, Elizabeth. All right. Is there anything else before I move us back into the presentation to go through the remaining comments for added discussion? This was excellent. Thank you all so much for your perspective, your feedback, your context. I can't tell you how much clarity you're bringing me as a planner working on this. I'm sure Chelsea is nodding her head, feels the same. So thank you very much. Anyone else before we move forward?
Yeah, what I had put in the chat just recently is that I think that the path forward is to really edit that quality of life section and begin to see what it looks like with the metrics that are noted with some of those maps, and to see how it translates into the quality of life section as a way to address those with performance indicators. So I think we won't really know if we're there until we take that chapter on and begin to see what that looks like with real edits. And I know you're talking about putting these maps together and there's still staff working on it. But I think that's what this group really needs to do in order to see it be tangible.
Noted. Thank you, Kathy. Yes, and just speaking to that, again, that is something that I think initially, we've been hearing about this. Heidi, I know when we met with you for the office hour was the initial conversation we had and kind of understanding what that integration and overlay might look like. And so right now it's just a matter of time and capacity. So, we're very much going to try and bake that in. We want to try to do it at the next Wednesday's meeting number 3. If we are unable to make that happen within 1 week, then we will definitely do it for meeting number 4. Again, just thinking about all that we still have to clarify and unravel in terms of the other themes. But definitely that has been put as a priority. I want to just make that clear for the group, and we're going to make sure to work with our MPI leadership team to figure out what that looks like. I guess what I was explaining in my emails, just for more clarification, Kathy, is, instead of having this 280-page document, let's pool all the maps and just put them into a PDF so that we can share that and everyone can have that and we can just move through them more easily. Another thing that we can try and do, which might take a little bit more staff time and capacity and working with our GIS team, is we can try and integrate or like overlay certain maps. So I know that Heidi had mentioned looking at, like, for example, the environmental resiliency map, and putting that like on top of the opportunities map that's in the land use section, for example. So really it's just a matter of teasing out, what does that look like? How do we be most intentional? We would have not been ready for that today. So I do apologize. We do have sort of these short timeframes that we're trying to be intentional in preparing for these workshops to utilize your time to the best of our ability. So does that make sense for everyone? Is that okay moving forward? I see a couple of head nods. Okay. Okay. So I'm just going to get us back into this presentation that we had created. So that
Val,
yeah.
Sorry, I just want to jump in. In the chat, I think people are calling for the need for a quick break before we move forward.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for that. Yes, absolutely. Let's go ahead and take a break. Sorry, my screens are everywhere. Chelsea, I can't see the time. What time is it?
It's 5:06.
Okay. Do we want to come back at 5:11, 5:12? Does that sound okay?
I see some head nods.
Okay, let's do 5:12. We'll be back here. Thank you, Chelsea. All right, welcome back, everyone. It's 5:12, so I want to get us started. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. Hopefully I do this right. Chelsea, please let me know if I'm messing anything up. Let me
Looks great to me.
slideshow and change the display settings. Chelsea, can you see that full screen?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for hanging through with us. We are getting through this 2-hour powerhouse work session. I am going to turn it over because I love sharing responsibilities, and we've got our new team member here that's just so stellar. Chelsea, I'm going to go ahead and just walk through the slides, and I'll allow you to just go through them with us in this next piece. So I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Val. Yeah, we just wanted to provide a quick update on where we are in addressing the comments we've received from you all over the past few months. I know Val's mentioned a couple times that we have been aggregating your feedback in a spreadsheet and kind of categorizing it and working through it. So we just wanted to let you know about the comments that we've either addressed to date or that we're in the process of addressing. And again, this is just strictly the quality of life comments. We have many others that fit into a lot of other categories, including equity, which we're aware has some overlap. But in terms of quality of life, so yeah, the slide before kind of talked about the ones that we've already addressed, so that, you know, we've ensured that the tree canopy and water quality basins are discussed. We know that there's some more to do there. We've ensured that plans like Denver Food Vision 2030 are named in the plan. We've ensured that content on tree canopy is included in the Valverde neighborhood section, and that air and noise pollution are discussed. We've corrected some information about Joseph Martinez, and we've ensured that equity and inclusion are explained and integrated throughout the plan. In terms of the comments in process, if we move to the next slide, we know that what we've been hearing from you repeatedly is about building out this historical narrative and the existing conditions section of the plan to really emphasize past harms, center community strengths, and identify opportunities to advance health equity, and really connect those to the recommendations. So we know that's a really big task, but we just wanted to let you know that we're really working on that actively. And then we've already discussed the analyzing existing maps for contradictions and quality of life emphasis. We are looking into our ability to incorporate information about brownfields, expand information about water regulations and floodplains, including, we've heard the request to create a separate section on water, and then including material about green zones, adding more depth and content, especially to the Valverde and Sun Valley neighborhood section recommendations about pollution and tree canopy, and then also connecting the STAR program to the community safety section. So that is a quick summary of where we are at in the quality of life comments. And then Val is going to take it from here to do a deeper dive on some of the comments that we thought could use more clarity and discussion. And at the end, we will open it up for any other comments about things that we missed or would like to include.
Thank you so much, Chelsea, for that overview. And again, we just want to emphasize we've been working really hard on the back end to identify the things that we know are pretty clear and that we know we can change more immediately. And so we will go back to those slides if we need to talk about anything else in addition to kind of the back end work that we've been doing in correcting some of the comments and feedback we've received. But what we would like to spend the rest of the time doing is really spending time unpacking and unraveling these larger, more complex comments that our team is sort of struggling with to really understand in terms of clarity the action that needs to be taken or the changes that need to be made. So you know, these aren't in any kind of order of prioritization. They're just how they came up in quality of life, given the different documents we've centralized. I will just give a minute for everyone to read through this one. I'm not sure who wrote this comment, But I figure because it is a collective voice of the small group that maybe everyone can kind of get an opportunity to speak to some of these and help our team really clarify what these mean and how they should be applied to the changes. So I will stop talking and just give a minute to read through. And once you've read through, just feel free to, if you all want to try to chime in and help us dissect this one a little bit, just so that we understand really what this is saying and how we should be thinking about changing the plan draft as it stands. Would be very helpful.
I'm gonna make a guess and about what this is. The feel underneath it feels like it's naming that, like the opportunity map sort of thing. Like some of the maps have the power to be implemented, like maps that show recommendations don't reflect how it relates to green spaces, and it just looks like a green light for developers to go forward with speculative development in a way that may trigger gentrification and may not, like increased density without actually hitting IPCC goals for climate. Increasing density without hitting other things too. But this one is really looking at, like, how do we use our maps to be able to, I think this concept was the concept under here that's in that PDF that we just looked at is around the idea of green vitality zones and green zones that are connected by resiliency corridors. That the corridors aren't just like transportation, and even transportation oriented development doesn't necessarily, like that'll, there are often missed gaps where that happens, where you don't have the it's not comfortable to walk still, and so people don't, like, even if there's proximity of homes to a transit station, if there's not amenities and it's not a green corridor, people may not be doing that. One of the things that we heard the most in Valverde was that people don't use transit as much because, one, it's uncomfortable, and that uncomfortability was both from lack of shade, but also the safety issues that were there. So like if you have density that's done well, you have eyes on the street. If you have density that's done well, you have trees on the street that are working with eyes to create a healthy environment.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Heidi, I think you were next, and then I see Kathy's hand. So Heidi, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. It's kind of interesting because I looked at this and I was like, I could have wrote that, but I'm not sure if I did, and it's just kind of indicative of how I think we're all kind of moving into these areas together, which is great. But I think that when I see this speaks to systems planning, and to again, like, talk about the maps. If I were looking at creating a system in systems in, say, like a garden or on a farm or in sort of a regional neighborhood, when I look at our grouping of neighborhoods and look at it as like systems thinking, how do we it would be to do the first thing I would do is create a base map. And it seems like that the one thing that could tie all of the things that we're talking about together is a base map that addresses all of that, the green spaces and the vitality zones and the resiliency corridors, to address a lot of the things that are going on in our neighborhoods. And especially, like, I don't know if Jean's still here with the with Mile High, with the station area plan. it seems in some maps later on to be kind of grayed out, like that's been solved. But then we look at the clover, and which hasn't been solved, but also shows a lot of density. And there's not, you know, and along our river, we don't see, we leave to the developers to decide where to put these green spaces. And those green spaces are put in to benefit the benefit of the developer, not to the benefit of the community. So if those things were put in a base map first, if we were like, this is where it makes most sense along our river, so the developer doesn't get to come in and decide. And again, that speaks back to attracting development that can speak to things in this slide, which are like, yeah, well, we want green space next to a river because, you know, that ties into our what our goals and, you know, our core values are. So when I see this, it speaks to me as, you know, creating a base map that has all of these things already incorporated, so it informs how everything is designed, so that developers aren't looking at this and piecemealing like, oh, well, it looks like the best place to go for the next extractive is, you know, Barnum or the park or wherever it is. So.
Thank you, Heidi. Kathy, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, what resonates for me when I look at this is maybe resiliency corridors, may tie also to vitality zones. But it seems like when we look at this piece of having more green spaces, we need to begin to look at the maps that talks about environmental quality and climate resiliency recommendations, to where we know where there's detention priority areas, and we know where there's need for increased tree canopy and other street green amenities that can be identified and inform where the green spaces need to be enhanced. So when I see that map and I look at, for example, where we have in Lakewood Gulch that goes through Villa Park, it stops pretty much at Wolf and doesn't continue all the way to Sheridan, even though the creek goes that way. So that would be a natural area that could be a bigger green space area to be enhancing the neighborhood, so that we have that connection with the gulches that are already there and just reinforcing that. Same thing with Weir Gulch, where we have Weir Gulch and part of it along First Avenue that sort of disappears. How could that really begin to inform where we might need more green space? And then you have certainly the whole area around Sun Valley and Valverde, where you have a part of a neighborhood in Valverde on the east side, close to the Platte and that youth center, that is sort of isolated from where there are homes and there people are living, but they're isolated because of the industrial area. And you can also see how that heat island area, it just permeates that whole section. That is where there's more green space. So that's where you integrate those two, the map that's telling you what the problem is and the solution of where needs to be enhanced to improve upon. And that's where you start informing where that would go, besides other quality of life that might tie to going across 6th Avenue. So it's more green space as well.
Yeah.
So that's coming for me when I see that.
Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, that was very helpful and much appreciated. How about others? Anyone else before we continue to move? We've got about, I want to say 4 or 5 of these that we'd like to review with you, and it's 5:25. So I do want to kind of start to wrap this one up a little bit. If there's any other burning comments, responses that anyone wants to add. Heidi, is that a new hand? Okay. Anyone else want to chime in before we move forward from this one?
Just real quick, I just wanted to add off of what Kathy and Heidi said.
Yeah, go ahead, Yvonne.
When I read this comment, I immediately think of the industrial area. How can we make that area walkable so that from Tejon to on through 2nd Avenue to the Barnum area, it's more inviting, more green, more, and it would be, can I walk to work? Can I have a green job? So just exploring those different, because we do want development. We don't want to lose the integrity of our neighborhood. And Valverde is probably the last neighborhood, yet we're the first and oldest neighborhood. So I just wanted to piggyback off of what Kathy and Heidi said, so thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. Appreciate your comments and feedback. Anyone else before we move forward? Shayla, Sean, Jean, anything on this one? All right, not hearing anything. I'm going to keep moving. And so again, I'll just go ahead and stop here and pause so that everyone can take this one in, digest and read it, and then we can start discussing. And this one, I just want to mention, really feels like it ties and connects directly into the one we were just discussing. So any added thoughts, feedback, this one talks a little bit more to, you know, the favoring development or developers, and just if there's anything else to add with regards to these comments particularly.
I mean, just to build on that base map is that all the things that are mentioned here, ecology, food access, flood and climate, you know, equity, all those things that with a solid base map, we can start stacking all those mobility, all those functions on top of it. And a good map will create the potentialities for all the good things that we were looking for. So.
Yeah, that's a great point, Heidi. Thank you for noting that and just really tying back in that integration of all these different pieces. Anyone else want to add to this one?
I don't need to add anything, but just tying it back around the distinction around vitality zones versus opportunity zones, and how we present that as we go. I think that hits on a lot. And I think adding on what Yvonne named on the last slide, like this isn't exactly speaking to that, but like Valverde is by a river. Valverde and Sun Valley have major industrial zones right by our river. So what are the implications for how we manage our high intensity workplaces so that we can have walkable jobs? What Yvonne named before, it just is so critical. And I want it to be reflected in quality of life around like a call out that says what quality of life demands of economy and housing, what quality of life demands of mobility, so that that outcome can happen. And I think historically, it's really interesting to think that when Valverde first existed, it was a really walkable neighborhood. People walked to their jobs. They weren't necessarily jobs that were healthy unless it was the celery fields. And I don't know how that, but like a lot of it was toxic industry right on the water, but there were close-knit communities and vital culture and a level of density that allowed a diversity of community uses. And so it wasn't, there were probably some negative health impacts of that, but can we, once redlining came, it like just, it took what was good about it away, because people couldn't make investments and repairs on their homes. But can we create a, like with quality of life, can we have, as Yvonne named, we can have jobs and like green jobs, and a lot of them with housing that's appropriate and different a density of services. And I think like I would love to hear from Jean later too, but like Sun Valley is a really interesting example. It's a different example, but there is regenerative equitable development without displacement there. Yes, to Kathy will point out that like the equity building opportunities may be limited because most of the affordable housing is all rental based through DHA, but there is that opportunity for a greater mix of incomes and a greater mix of uses there. But having to that false solutions thing, that's a place that is a solution more where there is greater density, but there's also opportunities for vitality and equity in an integrated form. Like that's going to meet our affordability goals, and it's going to meet our climate justice goals more than business as usual across the city. So calling it out and calling out the CBA that Jean has championed with the coalition, and using that as an example of, like, Sun Valley shows up as an example, but I think it could be highlighted more as like what like Lisa and Jean and so many others have done with folks from the city to have a, I don't know, I'm rambling right now, but they're like even the their quality of life indicators that they've done their, I think I wrote a note on it and my words aren't coming. Methuen, I think it was a Methuen set of quality of life indicators that they were using pre and post through the choice neighborhoods bit. That might be a place to look to for some of our ideas about metrics, but also some of the principles to support it.
Yeah, and just kind of to add to that, I could see where maybe it would be a unique opportunity to say, how can we create generational wealth in Sun Valley with a mix of incomes, but also having programs that will help make, if I'm a working class person or I'm a low income person, how can I get a loan to build a house or have a place that I can own and build generational wealth instead of a DHA housing unit? So if there is going to be more mixed income, there should be opportunities for generational wealth building among people that really could use it, versus if I were coming, you know, two working people without any children to buy a house or an apartment or townhome.
Thank you.
I think we some of the things, you know, creatively, like the community land trust, that might help build on.
Okay, okay. Jean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I do see you're providing some comments in the chat. One says Sun Valley could end up with more market rate units than affordable, so we can't get complacent about equity. And Elizabeth responded, yes. And then Jean put, it will be multifamily housing. Jean, do you want to speak on behalf of any of your comments or follow up to this discussion?
Well, yeah, I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but I think I would love to have a side conversation sometime about, you know, the properties that are going to be sold for private development, even DHA, you know, not that we have a lot of control about that, but we do have some input into the design standards for those, as well as, you know, making sure they're compatible. But I think that, you know, we have talked a lot about home ownership, you know, whether it's, you know, a condo home ownership. I don't think we're going to see any kind of housing, you know, single houses, family houses built there. So we have talked about it, because I think what we want is we want our people in DHA to be able to get, you know, better jobs and to be able to move up in the neighborhood and without having to leave. I mean, you can be just there's folks that have chosen to stay in DHA and pay way over the money they should really be paying for really substandard housing in the past, because not only do they want a safety net, but it's their neighborhood. And there was no place for them to go if they started, you know, if they would, as you're coming in where you're not only right sized, you're also, you know, held to income restrictions depending upon the AMI of that particular building. You know, we had people that had to leave the neighborhood because the housing that was coming on didn't go to 80%. And there were a few people that, you know, with combined incomes in their family, they had, you know, been doing well, all of a sudden are displaced. So we want to make sure that there's a place for folks to go so they can stay in the neighborhood. And certainly if there's a way to build wealth or you know, through, you know, economic development, you know, business ownership or housing or what property, whatever it might be. But that's a big challenge. I think that that folks have asked for, but I can't say that we're all at all there. You know, we have a few units right now. It looks like we'll probably have within DHA 27 units that are going to be home ownership townhouses. half of them are deed restricted, and the other half at this point they're looking at, market rate, because that's kind of how they funded it. So I think all of those are still challenges for Sun Valley. And particularly if we look at anything with the stadium, that will be even more so.
Yeah. Thank you for that added context, Jean. Appreciate your feedback. Anything else? I do want to keep us going here because we do have around 23 minutes left. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Is there anything else that anyone wants to add or include on this one before we move forward so we can capture for note taking? Okay, not hearing anything. I'm going to keep us going. So there are these specifically, I think, can tie into, and you all let me know if you feel this is not correct, but I kind of just assumed that this would be more in line with the map overlay or the map analysis that we are planning to do together. So the first comment speaks to specifically the map on, and I think this might have been an old page and an old comment before we moved the quality of life section up top, but the environmental quality map is in the quality of life section. It says, it seems like it's a map for where developers can continue extract. We would love to just try to unpack that one a little bit with you all and see what that really means. I think we touched a little bit on it earlier in our conversation, but really understand that extraction piece for our team to really know what that means moving forward as far as how we are looking through our lens. And then the next one, we need to clarify, we need to clearly see how quality of life is impacted by the built environment, the lack of infrastructure or infrastructure improvements. And then the last one is around that performance zoning that we mentioned. Performance zoning combined with form-based codes may be a strategy to look at how we can have such diversity in a healthy way, making sure there aren't measured negative externalities like noise, smell, etc. So just wanted to kind of open up for some discussion around making sure that we're on the same page of understanding what these comments mean and how we should be looking through our lens to address them moving forward with the changes to the plan. And I will stop there.
I can quickly speak to the last one.
Okay.
But and if Jonathan were here, he'd have better things to say. But Euclidean zoning that just separates uses tends to also, like, it makes everything single family, et cetera. And there are losses, like that falls into the category of keeping density low or not mixing uses at all, doesn't help our equity and vitality goals. The thought is that if we were to, there's a risk sometimes when you allow for a mix of uses, those uses are not actually mutually beneficial. There's this award-winning project at Bethel New Life at the L station in Chicago. And like it was a community design project and it had what the community wanted, but they put in the same building a dry cleaner next to a childcare center with shared airflow. So like, that's not good, right? So it might be convenient, but it's not necessarily healthy. And so how do we, if we're gonna allow for a mix of uses, which makes things more walkable and is convenient and like can really support vitality, how can we make sure that things are, that we're designing for mutually beneficial uses? And so performance zoning, the idea of it is form-based codes and performance zoning are intended to focus on where you want to get and give maximum competitive flexibility to people to demonstrate their plan to get there. So it's a targeted universalism sort of thing in the equity world where like every child or every community has a different set of needs to be able to reach the same universal goal. Then in this case, like if there are clear performance measures or elements that need to be met to approve a development, those can be met, and what Shayla ran through of like what that process might look like. I thought that was rich. And form-based codes designed for the form, like you can have a lot of uses, and if you can have a lot of different uses, but you may not have a walkable street. You might not have setbacks or like requirements for landscaping, that you still have a walkable environment. And so the combination of physical form that shapes what the pedestrian realm is, and the like performance levels around different community capitals or pollution regulations or something, those are designed to name the goal and allow people to compete to get there, instead of trying to make everybody exactly the same and then suboptimal.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for dissecting that last one for us. That's super helpful and very appreciated. Anyone else want to add to that one or the other two that we have here? Feel free to just raise your hand or just chime in if you feel the need.
Yeah, again, it does seem to be that sort of tug and pull between what you get with density and how that relates to quality of life. I think a really good example that we see that's really in West Colfax, but even looking at 44th and Tennyson, and how you lost a lot of variety of buildings and you ended up with more of a sheer sort of wall face that ended up being at a certain height and density, so that you ended up with not all the pieces that you wanted. It really didn't become as walkable, and you don't necessarily see people on their front porch or you know, connecting with their community. They're driving into the garage and going up to their apartment. So that piece of whether performance zoning is what would do it, or it's more of a design overlay or neighborhood overlay, conservation overlay, I think those pieces need to be looked at a little more carefully, so you don't just go with one over another, but you have multiple solutions within a piece. And I guess my question, just a quick little curiosity, is the environmental quality map the same as the environmental quality and climate resiliency recommendation map? Are those the two the same, or is it something different?
Oh, you know, I would need to look at the plan, Kathy. I have it pulled up here. I don't want to hold us off, but
I think we should skip over it. It will, our map conversation is going to happen next week.
yeah,
Like,
right.
That environmental quality on the past thing was on page 152, but it was differently numbered, and it's too confusing. And the main theme is let's not have opportunity. Let's focus on vitality zones with equity and not just have opportunity zones and whatnot. So it's a general concern, whatever that is, it's about a concern of speculative development. We've named it before, and we'll be able to look at it better with all the maps next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Elizabeth. And okay, I'm looking, we've got about 15 minutes, and I wonder if there are other voices that would like to share just with regards to these three and how they are speaking to.
Can we just
the
move
plan.
on if you're clear about it? This was for your clarification, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
and we can circle back. I'm just honoring your need for clarification on things. And,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
this is the last slide, Elizabeth. So
okay.
again, I just wanted to, yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to, we're good. We've got
Okay.
15 minutes. So that's why I'm just opening space for others in the group
Good.
if we want to continue to share perspective and feedback with regards to these three.
Great.
Kathy, go ahead. I see your hand up.
Yes, and I was wondering if you could unshare the screen, because I'd like to share one of the pieces that I see that's maybe a helpful area to look at.
Yeah,
So I
go ahead,
can
Kathy.
find
Again,
that.
we have 14 minutes. So, you know, this is your time. You all let us know how we want to continue on.
I was hoping I could find it here. Let's
And
see.
also let me know if you have trouble at all sharing.
Yes, what I was trying to do was get to, let's see. Ah, here we go. Okay. So hopefully you're seeing, I mean, one of the things that sort of struck me in the quality of life, this was related to sort of the food section. But to me, it doesn't need to be just with food. To me, it resonates with a lot of these guiding principles that we're looking at throughout the quality of life piece. That might be a good way to start how the quality of life chapter starts, by having the vision and guiding principles of inclusion, healthy, vibrant, resilient, you know, and the guiding principles that are listed, but, you know, scratch out sort of food, because I think it goes across the board, not just with food. When we're looking at inclusive cities, strong neighborhoods, healthy, productive populations, promoting health in, you know, for everyone, vibrant economies, resilient cities, that diverse, environmental, responsible areas to live, you know. So it doesn't have to be just with food alone. I think this could be morphed into something that goes across the board and maybe is a way to sort of visualize what quality of life looks like throughout this whole plan. Is it inclusive? Is it healthy? Is it vibrant? Is it resilient? Yeah. So I just wanted to share that as an idea to sort of launch from.
I think that's really helpful to name, because I know that right now we don't have our principles clearly articulated ahead. And I also remember anxiety around the original set of things that were called guiding principles for the plan, because there's a lot of language for the principle that were verbs that are easily associated with a dominant economic model of capitalist growth, or speculative growth. I'm not have as many problems with capitalism as socialism and communism and all the rest. So I'm not privileging there, but I think what Kathy's asking, it would be cool to look at that. Oh, it is, okay.
So I want to be just really clear because I'm just a little confused. So these,
I didn't see that.
oh,
in,
this is actually, this is a presentation that I pulled up that we have on our webpage available for the public to review, to help understand the overview of the last 2 years, the work we've been doing, how to review the draft plan content. And it's in English and Spanish. And one thing we haven't put up yet and are working to put up are the audio recordings of this. But this is one page, Elizabeth, that I pulled because these West Area Community Guiding Principles, like, I just want to be clear if these are the ones that you're speaking to, because these were the ones that were drafted and created and crafted up by the steering committee. And I wonder if, you know, if these get put at the forefront because the committee helped to carve them up and create them, or if this is what you're speaking to that is not reflecting.
it wasn't to me when it originally came out, but I didn't
Okay.
want to get in the weeds with it because we had it wasn't like, but like, it's subtle, like, but if principle, it used to be in another order too. And like
Okay.
grow was first and expand. And that, like, grow and expand are like the grow was first, and there's an assumption that this is all about managing future growth and we should be growing, and in the way that the past 15 years was focused on attracting development and growing in a speculative development kind of way. And so it was just like, I didn't make the words didn't there's a great thematic analysis that CPD did to be able to organize a whole host of a lot of feedback. And I think there were words that were used to summarize it.
Okay.
And some of the words caused, I know, a couple of us anxiety, but we also didn't want to, it wasn't like, I didn't want to, I know back then it was like, that doesn't vibe with me, but I am so word sensitive that I didn't want to derail the process, and I wanted to, like, the green text, we want affordable housing. We want, we want more than handle it. Like, we want to like have a particular type of development. But like the grow, expand, and adapt can all be things that maintain a broken system and
Okay.
keep it amplifying. And
Sure.
so I don't
Yeah.
think the green principles are saying that, but it didn't ever, like, it didn't feel like it came from the steering committee to me. And I don't know how other people felt, but I didn't see them in the plan.
Okay.
And some of the principles that we threw out there in the PDF speak to a lot of those same sort of things once implemented too. So
Okay.
I don't know.
Gotcha.
It is a question of whether the principles that we want to be clear that we name. And I bet those principles that Kathy just showed that you had in the quality of life plan, I
Mhm.
bet a lot of those end up saying the same things, like being a placeholder for some of the same things that are in the green. And I
Right.
didn't do a
Mhm.
close read of this just now. I just had a hunch that probably, like, what I heard at every original meeting was that the surveys said food is a major issue, affordable food and access is a major issue, like affordable housing and gentrification, housing stability is a major issue, and that mobility and a diversity of mobility options were major issues. And those are like major sections of the plan. Even though food doesn't have its own, it's still heavily, beautifully represented in the quality of life section, with a lot of attention with the food and communities group, and it's awesome. So anyway, like but those can be articulated by different.
Sure. Okay, this is great. And I'm asking all these questions because I'm thinking about just the workshopping and the time that we invested in writing these together as a committee. And also thinking about the reorganization of the priorities and how these were written. Elizabeth speaking to, the grow and expand being a little bit triggering in a sense, and how those started at the beginning. I know that Eugene did take some time to intentionally reorder these. And it's interesting that, Kathy, you bring up the 4 pillars that come directly from the Denver Food Vision 2030. That was one of the graphics, along with a few others that we included in the complete food environment section under the quality of life umbrella. And so I wonder if it's a question for you all. I wonder, do these guiding principles need to be rewritten as part of this and included in the plan? Because if they're not serving the purpose and intent of the way that they were written in the beginning, and they're not to the satisfaction or meeting the equity and inclusiveness that we need to be meeting as far as the changes to the plan, that's also like a big flag that I'm kind of seeing here that might need to be addressed. So that's why I brought these up, Elizabeth, because again, they were something that we all worked on together as a committee over a year ago. And so if this is something that's not up to par or needs to be looked at and revised, then we should probably think about that as well. I also heard that we want to, maybe put these into the plan or try to mirror these like the pillars that we saw that Kathy brought up from the Denver Food Vision 2030. So I'm going to stop there and just see kind of what the group thinks about that. Do we need to revisit these guiding principles? Do we want to see them at the beginning of the plan? If you all can share some feedback and perspective there, because I just want to make sure that we're on the same page and that we have.
No, I think we need to revisit this, and I think we need to look at it more in a graphic sort of point of view that really people can understand very quickly. And then the guiding principles can be tied to what those pillars might be of a vision. In some ways, inclusive to me, I would rather change out to equity, but because I think that's part of what inclusion is. But
Sure.
inclusion is not necessarily part of what equity is.
Yeah, they are, they're different, but they're very
Yeah.
much intersecting of
Yeah.
each other. Yeah.
So I think we need to revisit it, because I do also see it being more land use driven, land
Okay.
use built form. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. And, you know, I do see, just as I'm reviewing these, again, we worked on these together over a year ago. So as I'm reviewing these, I feel like there's a lot that we have reviewed today in terms of that language and really emphasizing the priorities of what we're talking about in terms of quality of life baked into these, right? Like that makes a lot of sense. And also I'm looking at time. Yvonne, I want to go to you. You have your hand raised and you also put a big chat in the comment box. So please feel free to use the last of our time and
All
share
I
your
wanted to say
voice.
about this is, if there's a way to be accountable, so we can't just say preserve, how are we going to preserve? Like, you know, some kind of accountability tied to these, maybe metrics or something. I wanted to add that.
Would that look like, Yvonne, I'm just going to throw this out there, but so, you know, obviously this is kind of more higher level. And so the tie-in would be the implementation chapter and the matrix. I don't know if we want to get super specific in like the how and include that as like a sub piece to say C section this and this, C section this and this. Like, I don't know if we want to get that specific, but this is more intended
No,
on like
just-
higher level.
Just the integrity of when you write that, you know that it's in the plan.
Okay.
So not
Okay.
necessarily have where it's at, but just the
But so
integrity of
we
knowing.
know, yeah,
Yes.
so we know we can point to the metric and the implementation piece and where it is and really like connect those dots. Okay,
Because some of
Okay.
this might not come to fruition right away, right? I mean,
sure.
it might take 10 years to get there, but
Yeah,
knowing when you wrote the plan, it's in the plan somewhere.
absolutely. Yeah. And did I hear that you all, once we revisit these, revise these, is this something you want to see at the beginning of the plan as well, just to set the stage?
Yeah, I mean, I think the introduction, like if there's, you know, principles and paradigms guide everything that we do.
Of course.
And I think it would be, I don't know what the process is to revisit them. It might be useful to save us a word crafting, like whatever, to be able to do that later, maybe. I don't know. Like, I feel like we know some of our principles clearly. I think that slide that had an articulation on the PDF that we just reviewed earlier, the articulation around equity is the articulation that this group thought about a lot, and it resonates strongly with the equity definitions that were in there, although we really like the bicycle image more than the fence where people are spectators and whatnot. I don't know, I think it would be powerful to have a principles section, principles and paradigms in the intro, with the beautiful equity section that was in there. That's a follow-up, but making sure that everybody who opens that plan in the intro, as they already do, see that equity is a core principle, and then we can add some other simple ones. And there's also a balance around, like, some of these principles apply across every section. Like there's a manifestation of, like, when we had liberty, reciprocity, integrity was a principle of making sure all of the pieces talk to each other. That's a principle of how we go about developing, more than a component. And so I think we've got, I don't know, for the same reason that I didn't speak out loudly before, sometimes word crafting can get us, I don't know, but I think principles are important. And I think those, I don't remember the process of how we came up with those particularly, but a lot of the same themes are there. It's just a question of presentation.
Sure.
And the last thing I want to say is that principles are powerful when they're really principles and they're few. Like, birds are able to flock across incredible distances because there are like 3 principles that they are self-organizing around. They pay attention to how far they are apart and where they're going and some other variable, but they're able to easily adapt and go for that. And if they're, and like beyond, I think the number is okay on there, but like if we want to ground in principles, making sure that they're ones that that are distinct and can be remembered, maybe, because like our brains can't hold like 10.
Yeah, and that's why I thought that one page that was talking about food captures a lot of bigger concepts
Mhm.
with one word. We might not figure out what that exact one word is, but at least it's what it is pointing a direction. That's all, you know.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, Kathy. I really appreciate you bringing up those 4 pillars, you know, and it helps us to clarify, thinking about our list of the guiding principles, like how we really make these monumental and impactful, and sort of what those different elements or pillars are for our specific plan. So yeah, this is all wonderful. And I just want to again thank you all so much for your time, your commitment, your intention. This has been extremely helpful. I know Chelsea has a ton of notes we're going to go ahead and review and incorporate into our centralized list of things that we're really trying to keep track of and keep as priority as we're moving forward. And then as far as next steps and for next week, we're really going to try to get the maps PDF'd and get the map integration analysis conversation started for this next one. I think that would be tremendously helpful before moving forward and diving into any of the other themes like everyone has suggested. And again, we're listening and hearing you. This is your work sessions. We want to make sure that you all are leading this and helping us to get to where we need to be as far as the changes to the plan. And so if there isn't anything else, I want to just wish you all a wonderful evening, a great week, and you'll be hearing from us. We'll send out a PDF of the presentation once this meeting is done. Anything else before we close? All right, everybody, have a great night. Thank you again. Take care.